Welcome to Talk Jam, musicians jam just for fun. Here at Talk Jam, recorded live and then flash frozen in a secret undisclosed location somewhere on the planet, two good friends talk about everything under the sun. It's about writing, it's about books, it's about the Bible. It's a lot about history, politics, and conspiracy theories. We're serving them all up in one big jam. Let's join authors Kelly Fitzgerald Fowler and Susan Sloat as they talk from here to eternity. Let the jammin' begin. Here are Kelly and Susan.
Welcome to Talk Jam. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Susan. And we are so happy to have you with us on this podcast we've been trying to start for a really long time.
Yep, I think we finally got it going.
Yeah, this is exciting. Very big deal.
Yes.
Very big deal.
So, Susan, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here. Don't you just love it when talk show guests say that?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where else would you rather be? I mean, please, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. I am Susan Sloat, and I have been an author for more than 30 years. I've published more than 20 books. I've done screenplays and 2 stage plays that I've directed or co-directed as well as written. That have all been performed and premiered. And the thing I'm probably best known for is a novel called Forward to Camelot, which was originally published in 2003 and re-edited and republished in 2013. It's a time travel thriller about the JFK assassination, and it has an enormous amount of real American history in it that most people do not know. We will be talking about that in a future episode.
That's going to be exciting, by the way.
I'm very excited. Yeah. November is always a big time for me. So I've really enjoyed my time as an author, mostly because I've gotten a chance to dig into the stuff I really like to do, which is historical research.
Yeah.
It gives me an excuse to sit in the library, which I just love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about me right now. Right. So, Kelly.
Because hopefully over time everyone will get to know each
I
other.
hope so. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, we've known each other for 15 years.
Yep.
Since I was actually doing a book signing for Forward to Camelot, and you stopped and talked to me about it, and I became your friend.
Yep.
So I didn't know anything about you before that time. So where do you come from, and tell us about what's going on with you?
Okay, well, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. That's
cool.
Where I was born and raised, and so a Midwesterner.
Amen.
And since I met you, I became a writer too.
That is so cool.
Thanks to your inspiration.
I'm not sure I'd call it inspiration.
Oh, totally inspiration. And I have a book that came out last year called Over My Dead Body, a supernatural novel. And I just published a study guide to go along with it for those of you who like deep digs into some biblical, historical, mystery thriller stuff. And I'm about to start book 2 in the series. So
that's really exciting.
Over My Dead Body 2, but I don't actually have a name for it yet. So
I can't wait. What's really fascinating, I got to tell this story up front. This is terrible, but I'm going to do it. I was so excited about hearing about this story, but when you started talking about it, something like 10 years ago, I thought, you know what? She's not a writer. She's never done anything like this before in her whole life. And the type of story she's talking about is this epic story that goes from biblical times, from the end of the life of Jesus, straight through into our modern day. And I thought, that's going to be a very difficult thing for a first-time author to pull off. And then you kept talking about it. I knew you were working on it, and then you finally said to me that you've gotten something finished, and you were sending it to an editor, and you were still working on it. And then all of a sudden, it was like, it's coming out, and you were very excited. And I remember going to your book signing and getting a copy, and I was thrilled. It was beautiful. It was beautifully done. And I thought, you know what? I am going to have to read this novel because I'm going to be working with her on some publicity related to it. And I have to read it so I can talk to her about it intelligently.
Yeah,
but
I forced her to read it.
No, I wouldn't put it that way. But I knew that conscientiously I had to read it. And so I'm thinking, if I don't like it, how am I going to get around this? How am I going to find a way to be enthusiastic about this? And what's interesting about the whole thing is I started to read the book and I got completely hooked on it. It was some of the best writing I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And the thing I really loved was it was written in very short chapters, so you could get into something and get out of it very quickly. It moved crazily, and it was really fascinating because by the time you're at the end, you were basically kind of into like a Robert Ludlum type novel or an Angels and Demons or something like that, the Da Vinci Code. It was just a lot of adventure and a lot of movement and a lot of whatever. And it went from different countries, different times, different periods in history. And it was just fabulous. And I was so impressed. I think I was reading till 3 o'clock in the morning some nights.
I know you.
And it was just, I finished it in like 4 or 5 days, and I was just so thrilled with it. So I'm going to just throw that little plug in there. We're going to talk about Over My Dead Body.
I did the same thing with your book, Susan. I mean, I am a huge time travel fan. And
I know.
One of the reasons why I loved your book so much was the time travel aspect of it, not to mention all the other historical stuff that was in there. And we're both just history nerds.
Yeah, so you're going to be getting a lot of history on this channel, on this podcast, because we love talking about history.
We do.
There are too many things to talk about and nowhere near enough time. But the good news is that we've been talking to each other nonstop for 15 years. So I figure that you might as well be part of it as well. So one of the things I did want to talk to you about that is really cool is that as part of Kelly's background, one of the things that she did was she wrote a very interesting paper in college, which unfortunately is lost to history right now, speaking of history. But it was about a topic that is absolutely fascinating to both of us. And I really want you to talk about it. Tell us a little bit about this paper that you wrote and how it actually relates to your personal journey in life.
Okay, well, actually it was an assignment. I think it was my junior year in college, and I was told to pick a topic and write a 30-page paper on a topic.
Oh my God, 30 pages.
30 pages was like huge back then, on a topic that happened the year that I was born.
Oh wow,
so
that's cool.
this is going to date me, of course. So anyway, so I picked Star Trek. It was It started in 1966. Gene Roddenberry was, of course, the creator of Star Trek, and it hit the airwaves that year. And I was just excited because it was something my dad and I shared that we loved. We would watch Star Trek together, and it was just so fascinating to me. And 2016 was its 50-year anniversary, so that
unbelievable.
Gives my age away again, but I don't care. Anyway, I love the wisdom of aging, so I just am over
And your paper was titled The Philosophy of Star Trek?
Yeah, it was. I had I was going to University of Nebraska to Omaha, and I heard they had a philosophy of Star Trek class at University of Nebraska at Lincoln, but I just didn't have time to go drive to Lincoln.
I would have transferred at once.
I know,
My God.
right? I wanted to. It's just that, I was working and full-time and going to school part-time, so I just couldn't get to Lincoln for it. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons why I decided to do my paper on the topic, because I just wanted to research it because I found it so fascinating.
Not surprising.
And since I have moved a few times since I wrote it, it is lost somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's not on any of my computers, but hopefully I'll run into it one day. I'll probably in some of those boxes in the garage that's, buried deep or something. But the premise of it was that Gene Roddenberry had a way of being able to use a TV show to approach some topics that otherwise would have been extremely painful, like racism. And I remember when I wrote it that one of the episodes that really, really caught my attention when I watched it was the one called Let That Be Your Last. And in this episode, what happens is the Enterprise shows up at a planet, and the planet is war-torn. They're just fighting each other right and left, just killing each other. And Captain Kirk, Scotty beams up these two leaders from each side of the conflict. And one leader has a white on the left side and black on the right side, and the other leader has black on the left side and white on the right side. And they essentially look exactly alike, but opposites. But they can't seem to come to any kind of agreement to peace for their two people that are living on this planet. So they're just killing each other.
Isn't this a little bit like the Dr. Seuss book? Was it The Sneetches or something?
Yeah, it's very much
same
like
sort of idea.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something really interesting about that in a second.
Go ahead.
The Sneetches thing. Anyway, they try to work it out, and Kirk can't get them to come to an agreement. In the meantime, the planet they've actually annihilated. By the time these two guys have done their negotiating and not come to a conclusion, they look down at the planet and there's no life left on the planet. So they're essentially the last two people alive from their planet. And they've been fighting this whole time, and in the meantime, everybody died on the planet. So Kirk goes ahead and sends them back to the planet and says, you're on your own. We can't fix this, basically.
Wow.
And so the episode was, a clear black and white episode. It was happening in the 60s, so this is all about racism and people not accepting each other. And as a kid, I remember watching it and thinking, oh, this is like the Sneetches. I remember because the cartoon The Sneetches was on often, occasionally in reruns and stuff like that, with the stars on the bellies and all that. And when I was actually doing a little digging into the Sneetches thing, I found out that Dr. Seuss, who I actually got an autograph from.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he did the Sneetches thing because it was a thing about anti-Semitism. Isn't that amazing?
It's not surprising.
Which the stars, right?
Well, he actually did. I've done a little bit of reading about Dr. Seuss. He is so fascinating. He actually did propaganda, not propaganda, but whatever you want to call it, films for World War II to actually lift up the spirits of our people. And he did them very, very well at that time. You want to know how he got his name, Dr. Seuss?
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Okay.
His name is Theodore Geisel,
Right.
and he was working on his school newspaper at college. This is in the 1920s, and of course, Prohibition was going on, and of course, as a young guy, he was drinking.
Yeah.
He got caught drinking, and they said, we're going to throw you off the school paper. This was a huge punishment to somebody like him. They didn't expel him, but they decided to throw him off the school paper. So he decided he was going to continue to write for the school paper anyway. And he changed his name to Dr. Seuss, Seuss being his mother's maiden name.
Oh.
And he simply took that name and kept it for the rest of his writing career.
Wow, that's really fascinating.
So there you are.
Huh.
It's,
Well, I guess my point too with all of this, even the philosophy of Star Trek and the Sneetches thing and the against racism and anti-Semitism was that writers are so powerful. They can encourage you during a wartime. They can address topics in a way that, it's just so amazing.
They can inspire you.
How
It's fascinating
writing
too.
can change so many things.
There is a woman whose stuff I've started to get into. She's on YouTube and she's on Twitter. Her name is Tiffany Fitzhenry. And she was saying that she does a lot of stuff digging into people in Hollywood. And eventually we will be talking about her stuff, I know. But one of the things that was really interesting is that she said that her greatest motivation for this is the value of the story and the importance of the story and how much it matters to other people and how much it can change the world. And if your stories are perverted because people are lying to you and because the lies have become part of our culture, that is the end of the story and you've got to change it. And so that's what she's really getting into. And she said that's why she's doing all the deep digging she's doing on the Hollywood celebrities that she's digging on, because she wants to make sure that the stories that are told are true stories.
Yeah.
Which is our only hope for redemption, really.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I agree with her about that. I think the story is extremely important. I really, really do.
Yeah.
So 30 pages on the philosophy of Star Trek. How did you do on the paper? Do you know?
I got an A. I got
good.
straight A's my last 2 years in college.
Congratulations. That is fantastic.
I know that. So it was a lot of work, but it was really wonderful, and it was a great accomplishment to do 30 pages at the time.
A 30-page paper, that's,
It's huge
It's
for a
a-
college student.
I had to do a 25-page paper once, and it was just, and it was turned in a week when I had a ton of other things going on. The 25-page paper, which I started the day before it was due, of course, was about the... I always did that.
Horrible.
Yeah. But it was about Robert Redford.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the romantic rebel.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that.
Yes. At some
Another
point.
time.
Yes, this was before the facelift, and he looked fantastic. And it was a long time ago, and
Yeah.
it was really about how he had shown himself to be a maverick and a rebel and whatever. This was at a time when he actually was. This is the 70s. So
Yeah.
things
Wow.
changed a lot between then and now, but
Yeah.
there we are. So
Awesome.
that is really, really fascinating.
That is.
So we should explain a little bit about what we're planning on doing. The plan is to tell you about each jam that's coming up in each episode, and our plan is to do like 3 of them. And they may be a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, but they should be somewhere around 10 minutes. The first episode, which I think we're pretty much finished with, is introducing us, and I think you've got an idea of who we are, and you're going to find out more.
It's the first jam.
First jam, right. Our second jam for this episode is going to be about Nanowrimo, which is otherwise known as National Novel Writing Month, which is always the month of November, and it's a very big deal. If you're a writer or you're an aspiring writer, this is a marvelous event to do. It doesn't cost anything to do it, and it's part of being a worldwide community of writers who are trying to write 50,000 words of an original novel in 1 month. which is a very exciting prospect.
Right, and we're going to be talking about that in the next 10 minutes.
We are. And then the third, we're going to be doing just a fun little thing about the 2016 World Series. We're going to be talking about the fact that that my children were at the Cubs' last game in Chicago, and we're just going to be talking a little bit about that. And some of our final jams on our episodes are going to be just fun things we're going to want to talk about. But that's pretty much it. So we're done with this segment. We're done with this jam. We hope you'll come back and see us in the next one. It should be just coming up any second. Thank you.
You're listening to the Talk Jam podcast with Kelly Fitzgerald Fowler and Susan Sloat. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute with another jam.
And here we're back, and we're talking in our second jam about Nanowrimo, which is otherwise known as National Novel Writing Month. I literally cannot remember how I found out about this, but I started doing it in 2005. It is a 30-day event that people around the world get involved with, and the idea is to write 50,000 words of an original novel in 1 month.
I remember how I found out about it.
How did you find out about it?
You told me.
Oh, I told you about it. When I get excited about something, I tell a lot of people, so there we are. Yeah, it's an extremely exciting event, and it started very quickly. It started with a guy named Chris Beatty, who actually founded it in 1999 back in the Bay Area. He and a bunch of his friends had day jobs, but they all had this dream to become writers. And it was like, I'm going to write a novel someday. And finally, they got this idea that what they would do is they would actually throw up a website and kind of agree to write something together, not write the book together, but write in a community so that they would keep each other accountable for what they were doing. And so what they would do is they wanted to, Chris was looking at things and thinking, how much should I look for? It happened to be in June of 1999. He said, well, I'm going to make it a 30-day event. And then he picked up The Great Gatsby from his bookshelf, and he looked at it, and it ran about 200 pages, and he said, okay, I think 50,000 words is probably an acceptable goal. So he said, 50,000 words, 30 days, an unforgettable ride.
That's a lot of writing.
It is a lot of writing. And so what happened was, at the end of June, he was one of 9 people out of 21 who had started who crossed the finish line with 50,000 words.
Wow.
And NaNoWriMo was born. And the next year, more people joined, and the year after that, more people joined. And by the time I knew about it, people around the world were actually doing it. And it's a very exciting prospect. There's, in fact, a redesigned website right now for this new November NaNoWriMo, and it starts on November 1st, which is this coming Friday, and I'm thinking we're all kind of getting ourselves ready to go.
Right. And we're both on there this year.
We're both on there, and this is very exciting. And the cool thing really is that you've got your own dashboard. You've got a thing which will actually allow you to track your words every day. You actually can put in how many words you write per day, and it will just update. It's extremely cool to watch this.
Yeah. So if you're participating this year, if you know what NaNoWriMo is, and you're participating, you can look up Susan Sloat, Sloate,
right,
and Kelly Fitzgerald Fowler. And,
right.
And we'd love to interact with some of you.
That would be absolutely great, yeah, because you can always be friends with us and, send us messages and all this other kind of thing. But the other thing that's extremely important is that every NaNoWriMo community has its own, center and focus that are run by what they call municipal liaisons. And so if you're in New York or Washington or any other place on the planet, you can find a group, whether it's for your country or for your city or whatever. I mean, I know that they have NaNoWriMo in Paris, they have it in Africa, they have it in Russia. And so the whole idea really is you can join that community, you can go to events with them. They have what they call write-ins, where you can actually go take your laptop or whatever it is you're writing on and actually work.
Yeah. What event have you gone to recently?
I haven't gone to any events recently, but I have in the past gone to starting kickoff parties, which usually start around Halloween. This year's kickoff party happened on Sunday, so I missed it.
Yeah.
But I've gone to kickoff parties where they'll give out little bags of swag and stuff, which allow you to do stuff, and it's really very interesting. And they have all kinds of other. They have all kinds of other stuff that's very exciting. And then they also have Thank God It's Over party, usually at the end of the thing, which is really, really nice. They invite people too, and you just go out there and have a really good time. And then they also will have, like I say, the write-ins. In fact, they had one I think it was 2 years ago. I think it was, no, maybe it was last year, where what they decided to have was like an almost all-night write-in. And they actually got a store, I think it's a gamer store here in the area, to actually agree to open up and stay open till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And then when people got tired of working there, they apparently took their laptops and went over to like a Waffle House or something.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and they just kept writing.
Oh, that's exciting.
It's extremely exciting, and I remember getting something like 5,000 words that day.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was very, very
That's
exciting.
pretty good.
It is.
So, yeah, I've participated in the contests sort of incognito until this year. I
Jump right in, be committed.
Yeah, when I wrote my first novel, which is like 430 pages, I did. It took me 10 years to write my novel. So, but I did 2 separate years. I got 20,000 words down.
That's exciting.
In November. 2 separate years that I worked on it. So it really was instrumental in me actually getting this novel out. You know,
yeah.
It took me 10 years. I made great strides in the month of November, the years that I did it. And I'm really excited about participating this year.
So what are you going to be writing this year?
I'm writing the second in the series of Over My Dead Body. So I haven't named it yet, but
Same characters?
same characters, a lot of the same stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's already in a world. I've created a world, so I can, and I've actually in my book, because it's a historical novel and it spans from 70 AD to current time, I've got about 15 characters in there.
Good. That's very exciting.
Historical characters that I can mention here and there, and I'm really excited about it. And it's funny, my daughter's actually doing it too.
Oh, really? What's she doing?
She is writing the novel that she's been kind of working on, but she's like, I'm going to write every day in November. So she signed up too. So we're going to be monitoring each other,
that's
kind of
exciting.
talking. And
Some years ago when my oldest son knew that I was doing Nanowrimo, he was old enough that he could write his own thing, but he was young enough. He would come home from like middle school or something, and he would sit down and he would write his pages, and then he'd have me read them.
Oh, wow.
So it's really, really great.
yeah,
So.
well, I haven't actually won the contest before because I've only written 20,000 words each time. But
Only 20,000 words. That's a big deal.
I know. It's a big deal, but I would really love to be able to win this time. But
I
mean,
agree.
you have to write 1,700 words a day.
You do. You have to write 1,700 words a day. And the interesting thing about that is I always try to spend the early days in NaNoWriMo getting ahead.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is start and write as much as I can in the first few days. And part of this goes back to NaNoWriMo 2011, when I was running a political campaign. And obviously the campaign ended in November because elections happened in November.
Right.
So with everything going on with the campaign, I wasn't actually able to start NaNoWriMo till November 11th. And so there I'm already behind by 10 days, right? Mm-hmm. So I wrote 53,000 words in like 23 days.
Wow.
It was really exciting. It really was. And I remember one day, my best writing day in the history of my whole life, I wrote 8,000 words.
Now, is that book published now?
No. It has not actually been completed. I got an enormous amount of it done, but no, it is not. And
How many books do you have like ready to be published that just need like some finishing touches or, some dedicated time?
I've got different books in different stages, and in fact, that's kind of an interesting story because this was my year. 2019 was the year I determined that I was going to get all of the books that I was sick of looking at off my plate and into a publishing imprint, which I actually have my own publishing imprint. But it's really interesting because I had decided, and it started with last year's NaNoWriMo, where I wrote a book about a rock and roll band. And I finished the first draft on New Year's Eve, 15 minutes before I was supposed to go out to a New Year's Eve party, which is really cool. So I have been working on that and editing that. At the same time, I have been finishing a boys' book that I've been wanting to write. And this is really... it's really a book about my children. I mean, if you have 2 boys, you might just as well enjoy it. And if they can't make you money, then there's something wrong with you, obviously. What's the point of having kids if they can't make you money?
I've used both of my children in marketing campaigns.
Yeah, you're very smart. And you also have a character named after your children in Over My Dead Body.
Yeah,
So,
I do.
there
Yeah,
you go.
that's
So you're
true.
making money off your kids, too. So good for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, the important thing really is that I wanted to write a series about these 2 kids who I thought, I thought their personalities were such that people would enjoy them. And so I finished a first draft of that book in like April or something. So, or no, I think closer to June. And then I finished the editing for the first draft of the Goosebumps book, the rock and roll band. And what I'm doing right now at this point is for Nanowrimo this year, I'm doing one about another, it's a girls series book. I am crazy about girls series books going back to the 40s and 50s. They are so
cool.
great.
Yeah.
And we'll have to talk about those. And the really cool thing about that is that I am doing a story that in some ways is kind of based on my mother's life.
Oh.
So this is a story about a girl who comes down from the state of Maine to New York City in the 1950s because she wants to be in show business.
Oh, wow.
And she encounters mysteries there. This is like Nancy Drew in the big city. And it's
cool.
very, very exciting. And so she gets started with this thing where she saves a little kid's life on a train. His family's so grateful that they help her get set up. They send her to a nightclub, which is one of the great New York nightclubs at the time, to get a job. And it turns out it's been trashed by a gangster. And the gangster's looking for something, but they don't know what it is. And so she gets involved with all of that and helps the girls that are in the boarding house she's in to kind of get involved with the nightclub, and ends up basically finding out what it is that they actually were looking for. And I've been writing on this book for a long time. It's called Sherry Holt and the Mystery at Scirocco. Scirocco being the name of the nightclub. And I want to finish that. So that's going to be my third book this year. So hopefully I've got the editing done on Goosebumps. I have a few scenes I have left to write. And so the plan is to finish the Sherry Holt book, which I have probably 25,000 words, so I should probably do another 25,000. And then go right into the scenes that I still have to write for the Goosebumps book and get that finished before the end of November. So the plan is to make sure that all three of those are done by the end of December of 2019.
Wow.
And have them all ready to publish.
Wow.
Which is very exciting.
That is so exciting.
It is. It means...
And they changed the rules this year, right? You don't have to be working on a book that you're just starting and ending the 50,000 words. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
No.
because in the past I never signed up because I had already started my novel and I already had maybe 10,000
Oh,
words.
I've written one page. It's too late.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's ridiculous how writers talk themselves out of doing stuff. But yeah, that was kind of the thing. But
that's silly.
I read that in the thing that you can have a book. You can work on a book that you've already started. If you
Well,
want.
obviously...
The idea is to get 50,000 words in.
My
no matter
thing
where you're
is
writing.
obviously I break rules because I've started books and I've gone in and worked on them during Nano. I never knew that there was a problem. I never knew that there was an issue. It's kind of like, yeah, well, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing I refuse to do is work on a book that was nonfiction because it's supposed to be about a novel. It's supposed to be about a creative
Yeah.
endeavor. So
Of course,
I left
yeah.
it at that. But other than that, I mean, anything goes.
Nonfiction writing month is like July.
Actually, you know, what's interesting is that Nano has had additional events that they have put in. They had a screenwriters thing where you actually were supposed to write a full screenplay, 120 pages
Right.
in 1 month, which is
Yeah.
actually quite doable because
It
there's so
is.
much white space on the page.
Yeah.
They also had a rewrite month, which is like in March, which is interesting, where you take your November novel and you rewrite it and edit it.
Oh.
Yes.
Ooh, I did not know that.
Yes, it's very interesting. You should look into that.
Yeah.
It's called the I've Written My Novel Now What month. And then they have 2 events that they call Camp Nano, which take place, I think, in June and July. And the thing is that you can sign up to be part of a camp cabin. And the whole idea basically is to make a decision about how many words you want to write that month. And then you sign that up as a goal, like 20,000 words or 30,000 words, whatever it is. And then you actually do that writing.
Whoops.
Yep.
Hitting the mic. It's okay.
I'm doing bad things. Anyway.
She's moving her hands when she talks.
I'm sorry. I'm getting so excited that I'm talking with my hands as usual.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point of the matter is that you can actually do those additional events where you actually choose the number of words you're going to do, whereas in Nano, it's supposed to be 50,000 words. I mean, obviously, nobody is monitoring you. You know that there's, by the way, there's a 3-day event that's actually kind of interesting that has nothing to do with Nanowrimo, but it's maybe inspired by it, and it takes place over Labor Day. Did you know that?
No.
You're supposed to write a novel in a 3-day weekend.
Oh, no way.
And then the whole idea of that is once you have actually finished that weekend, you're supposed to send the novel into the founders of the thing, and they will judge it.
Oh.
And it's like, wow, judgment.
3-day weekend.
Judgment. Yeah, it's supposed to be over Labor Day
Is
weekend.
it supposed to be 50,000 words, or is it?
I don't
probably
remember what they...
smaller, maybe.
I think maybe they're asking for 100 pages or 120, something like that. Whatever it
Wow.
is, you'll have to look it up.
That'd be good for a YA.
It could be.
Yeah.
I really could. I've never tried it, but I
Yeah.
really think at some point Labor Day weekend that might be worthwhile. You know, I love getting involved in stuff like that. I love
Yeah.
marathons. I love
Yeah.
things that involve an enormous amount of effort in a short period of time.
Yeah, I used to do that with my kids when they had to do math.
Really?
Yeah, especially Mackenzie. I'd be like, okay, you got to get your homework done. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes, and I want you to just hit it as hard as you can for 10 minutes and see how
Wow.
far you can get. And she would usually do pretty good when I put the pressure on her.
That's smart.
Yeah, it does work really good for getting your kids to do homework.
If nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. It really is. So that is really NaNoWriMo. I'm excited. I've won it 7 times, I think, or 8 times. I'm going back to do it again.
I
Yeah.
hope I win it this year.
I will tell you, it's really kind of an interesting story that happened in my very first NaNoWriMo. I was hitting it, like you say, as hard as possible in my first NaNoWriMo. This is 2005. And I was typing away, and my husband at the time came upstairs into the office, and he said to me, "There's a phone call for you." And I said, "Take a message." And I'm still typing. I'm not even watching him. And he says, "I think you want to take this call." And I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "Well," he said, "he's Alan Funt's son from Candid Camera."
Oh, cool.
And I had been on Candid Camera when I was a child. And so that meant something to me. And I was like, yeah, okay, get him on the phone. So I
That's
talked to him.
exciting.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
stopped my writing.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the guy is Bill Funt, who is in fact the son of Alan Funt, and that he and his brother had been involved with Candid Camera from the time they were children. And what's really hilarious is that he said he has known me all of his life because he has watched photos and videos of me all of his life because his dad was always playing that stuff.
Yeah.
And because his dad had had a series of kids on the show that he liked very much, those were the things he played over and over again. So Bill basically sort of like my little brother
Oh,
in
that's
some
so
sort of way, which is
cute.
very cool.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and my first NaNoWriMo, it was also kind of notable because I had decided to write a novel version of a screenplay I had never quite been able to get right in Los Angeles during my misspent youth many years ago. And I decided I would take the story and turn it into a novel. And I finished the entire draft, 76,000 words, in 26 days.
Oh, wow. Now
And
that's
literally.
even better than NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, that was the point. Is I figured as long as I was writing this thing, I was going to finish it.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of like early, fast writing and whatever. And because I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, I had lots of time to kind of sit down and just play
Yeah.
in front of the computer.
Right.
And so I was getting thousands of words done, and things were happening, and good things were working out. And so I got a draft of that actually finished.
Wow.
And I don't know if I ever am going to actually publish it, but part of me says, you know what? I wanted to get this story out of my system for a long time.
Yeah.
And I did.
So that's another book you have waiting to be published?
Maybe.
Wow.
Maybe. I'm not really sure, but that's one that I'm really proud
I thought
of.
I was doing good working on publishing the Bible study guide
You're
this
doing
summer,
great.
and then starting another book, having several. I guess I do have a screenplay going. We'll talk about that.
That's
later.
true. That's true. I think you do.
I don't know how writers do all this. To be honest with you, it's so funny. But
I think most of us, I think that the biggest curse for being a writer is the feeling that you're not doing enough, which has
Yeah.
always been the case for me. It's really hilarious. I always have felt like I haven't really accomplished anything,
No.
which is really,
No, your stuff is amazing.
let's say it's not
wait,
good for
you
you.
were
really.
on a special, a History Channel special on Alcatraz.
Yes, I was.
From
Wow.
a small book, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
it
I
a
wrote
small
a-
historical book?
I
Yeah.
wrote a book on history for young adults.
Yeah.
And then I got a call from a producer who was calling from the History Channel. They had a show that they were doing about ghosts.
Right.
And they wanted to do an episode about Alcatraz. And he said to me, I thought this was so fascinating. He said, yours is the only book on the subject I could get through. And I thought, number one, you're a writer-producer. And number two, Alcatraz is a fascinating subject. How could mine be the only book you could get through?
Well, because it was a kid's book and it was a quick hit. This is the deep.
Exactly. But
the
my
quick
feeling is if you're a
details.
writer-producer, even if you're
Yeah,
out in
but
Los Angeles, you should
when
be a
you're
little
looking
bit
for
more.
content, it's so much work to go read a bunch of books.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
so much work.
It is.
How much time have you spent digging into stuff that you're interested in just because
Right,
you're
but
interested?
he's just trying to make a show. So
That's true.
using a kid's book with a quick hit information is a great idea.
That's true,
I
but it's-
personally think it sounds a little, cutting corners, but for me, I'm a kind of a corner cutting kind of.
Listen, I totally understand when you have to, but I will say
Yeah.
one thing. I did get a great experience out of that because they flew me out to San Francisco
Yeah.
and they took me to Alcatraz to shoot.
Had you ever been there?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
That's part of the reason I got the book,
Oh,
as a
okay.
matter of fact, was because I'd been there. And my agent told him I was an expert. So I was like, yeah, jeez. Anyway, the part that was hilarious, I know. It was hilarious. But the part that was funny was that we got out there and we were shooting early in the morning because the tourists were coming. And what was happening is that they wanted to make sure that we were done before the tourists showed up. So we were shooting at like 6 in the morning. We did an interior. And then they said, okay, let's go outside. And you're going to just do this walk. And so they're going outside. The production crew went out to set it up, and I'm there with the producer on top of this building. Mm-hmm. And while we were standing there talking, the lights started coming on. I'm sorry, the dawn started coming up in San Francisco. I saw the sun rise over San Francisco while standing on Alcatraz.
Wow.
Most people cannot say that ever, because all the prisoners, of course, were below.
Right.
And
right.
most people were not there to actually see it. It was one of my priceless memories.
I went to Alcatraz in 1985.
That must have been interesting.
It was very interesting. We were there in the last part of the day, and the sun was going down.
Oh, good.
I wasn't on the top, but I remember taking the boat back and thinking, "Oh, look at the sunset." So,
and you got to hear all those wonderful
so you saw
ghost
the
stories.
sun up, and I
saw the sun.
down.
Yeah, it was a very exciting thing. So,
all right. Well, that's going to conclude our discussion on NaNoWrimo.
That's the end of Jam 2 in our episode
Jam
1.
2,
so stay with us because we're coming back for our final jam of the day.
Yep.
You're listening to the Talk Jam podcast with Kelly Fitzgerald Fowler and Susan Sloat.
Back again, everybody, and we're here with our third jam of the day. And our third jam is going to be about one of my favorite subjects, which is baseball.
Woohoo.
Yes, my favorite game, America's pastime. And what we're specifically going to be talking about today is our experience with the postseason, and very specifically with the 2016 World Series. Now, we're still in the postseason when you come right down to it in 2019 because the final game of the 2019 World Series has not yet been played. They forced a 7th game, very exciting, so we are going to have a winner-take-all, I think tonight maybe, which is a really exciting prospect. Mm-hmm. So, but 2016 was an especially exciting year.
So by the time this hits the airwaves, that might already be known.
That may very well be the case.
Yeah.
We'll do our very
It'll
best.
be
So
good.
forgive us.
No.
But anyway, the important thing really is that baseball is still the greatest game of all.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids have been Cub fans since they've been born. Because strangely enough, I married a Cubs fan. And I know that's weird because I was a Mets fan. And that's even weirder.
Yeah.
And there's lots of stories there. But and I got to tell you, in our entire marriage, whenever we had a fight, which was not that often, he would get totally frustrated with me and he would finally yell at me, Tommy Agee was out.
Ah.
And I'm like, yeah, honey, that was 50 years ago. I really think you need to get over it. But that was how
That's
he
a true baseball fan.
Yeah, he used to end fights with me that way, which is hilarious. And so what would happen is that my kids were, they grew up as Cubs fans. Mm-hmm. Their dad was always watching the Cubs and whatever, and they had dreadful teams. I mean, there are no words for how dreadful they truly were. And then in I can't remember what year it was, 2013, Theo Epstein came and took over with the goal specifically of winning a World Series after over 100 years. Wow. And he said, it's not going to be this year and it's not going to be next year, but we're going to build a team of players that can win a World Series. And he brought in a guy named Joe Madden, who was the best coach, manager in baseball. And they brought him in and he said, you know, we're going to do this. And in 2016, he always had, every year, he had a motto for the team, a little saying he would tell them to kind of keep their spirits up. And in 2016, it was try not to suck, which was great. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is. And I still have a T-shirt from 2017 that says "We didn't suck,"
Oh,
which
that's
I
a
really
good one,
love.
too.
It's really great. Anyway, the point is that in 2016, by that time, they had enough players in their system who were coming up, young players, all of them, you know, on their way to superstar status, all of them who were excited about playing together. And in 2016, miraculously, you know, this all happened.
Right.
So,
They won.
what's interesting is that my ex-husband, father of my kids, had told the boys that if the Cubs ever got into a World Series, he would take them to Chicago. It was a firm promise. And so at that point, they were in college, and he went to each of their respective schools and picked them up and drove them to Chicago.
What a good dad.
Yeah. And it was really great because they were there for the first 2 games out of the 3 games that the Cubs were playing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the morning of the 3rd game, which is a Sunday, I get a call from my son. And he says, Dad got us tickets for tonight.
Oh, wow.
Because they had lost the first 2 games, the price of tickets had come down. At the time that they were looking at it, the standing room only tickets were $1,100.
Oh, my gosh.
So because
That's ridiculous.
it's beyond ridiculous. The part that was interesting, though, is that the price had come down so much that he got tickets on StubHub. So for just over half a semester's tuition,
Oh, yes.
all 3 of them went to the game, and they got great seats. I think they were like 20 rows up.
Well, they'll remember that the rest of their lives.
I know that. And what's
Yeah.
fascinating about this whole thing is that I still have the text messages that my son sent me from the stadium.
Aw.
And in the middle of the game, he sent me a text, I can't hear anything.
Aw.
People were screaming so loud. They were so excited. It was such a big deal. And of course, that was the game that they won. The last game in
Wow.
Chicago was the game they won.
Yeah.
And I said, at the end, I said, did you sing Go Cubs Go? He said, Mom, you could hear us for blocks. It was
Aw.
just the most exciting time of their lives. They had the best time ever.
That is so awesome.
It was so incredibly thrilling.
I heard a story from another family that are huge Cub fans, which is my pastor's family.
Cool.
They had grown up loving the Cubs too, and of course, you know.
I've heard a
when
lot of
you're-
stories about the Cubs from your pastor.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you know that from the stage. They're
Yes.
talking about, well, we didn't win. You know, our pastors came from Chicago via Illinois to come here. But anyway, he was saying that him and his brother were fans, and since they decided to just get in the car and drive to Chicago for, I believe, the same game that you're talking about.
Right.
And they just wanted to be close to the stadium. They knew
Everybody
that-
feels that way.
yeah, and they knew the tickets were sold out, and they didn't think they had a shot at anything. But the morning of the game, he went out for a run. And as he's running around the stadium, he sees a line forming at the ticket booth. And he says to himself, what is going on over there?
Yeah, I got to check that
So
out.
he just went and stood in line, really not
No idea what for.
no idea what for, and you know, finally found out that there might be some tickets released at some point, I think. So they stood in line for like 8 hours because that was in the morning for a morning run, and the ticket box
Box office
it
didn't
didn't open to give away any extra tickets for, I don't know, 8 hours. So they stood there, and it was snowing, it was cold, and they were wearing shorts. And then once they got their tickets, they went and took a shower and went back. But anyway, so they did get into the game. They got great seats too. But anyway, standing.
they enjoy it?
Standing. Oh my gosh, it was like just like something, you know, you'd see in a movie. You know,
I know.
when they talk about it, you can just see, just like when you're talking about it with your sons, how excited they were and all
Oh,
that.
yeah. Kenny said to me when he first walked into the stadium, he said it was the most incredible feeling. He said, because I've seen all this stuff on television. I've seen the ivy, and I've seen the walls, and I've seen the home runs and whatever. I said, yeah, it's like seeing a movie star on the street. He goes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's it's something that wasn't real until it's suddenly real.
Right.
And then there it is.
Yeah.
And now my other son works for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, really?
And it's hilarious because last weekend, one of our friends, who is a huge Green Bay Packers fan, decided to go to a Packers game, and my son got him tickets to the game because he had his own set of season tickets
Yeah.
as part of the perks of his job, which is cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's the best job in the world. Anyway, so he took him on a tour of the stadium the day before the game, showed him every nook and cranny of the whole stadium, and this guy was just. I was talking to him last night. He said, I know I was basically slobbering over your son. He said, but this is the most exciting thing in the world to see all of this, how beautiful it was, how well done everything was, how, everything was put together so beautifully and all this other kind of thing. He said, I know that your son was sick of hearing it, but I just kept thanking him because it was so great.
Yeah.
The cool thing for me is that he sent me pictures of my son.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes,
And last night when I saw him, he goes into his wallet and he goes, here. He had taken business cards off of my son's desk and brought them to us so we could each have one.
Oh, that's so adorable.
It's wonderful.
I've been to see the Kansas City Chiefs because being from Nebraska,
Yeah.
it's not very far. And
Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, I loved it. My first NFL game was Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, cool.
And then I also saw like Bo Jackson, the year Bo Jackson played baseball and football.
Bo Nose. Remember
yeah.
the Bo Nose commercials?
Yeah. That was the year that I actually went to see the Kansas City Chiefs. And then now I'm a big Panthers fan. So
You want to hear a little bit of gossip that I picked up last night?
sure.
My friend told us that Colin had told him that there's a possibility that the Royals will be leaving their stadium.
What?
The Royal Stadium is literally cheek by jowl next door to the Kansas City Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if they leave their stadium, the idea is what they're probably going to do is Arrowhead's going to take over that space and expand.
Oh.
I cannot even imagine a bigger stadium than what they have.
Yeah, that's not like undercover information that you just gave out on
I
the
don't
air,
think
is
so.
it?
I hope
Oh,
not.
okay.
I don't think so. But it's one of those things where a decision has not yet been made and it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
one of the things I found interesting is that Sheldon sent us back a ton of stuff, photographs of his time during the tour that they were taken on. And one of the things that he had behind him was a sign that basically said that Arrowhead was like the loudest decibels, loudest noise levels in the NFL.
Oh, wow.
And it might very well have been. He said he didn't even think it was that loud, but they were sitting at club level, so it was a very different situation. So I said, send me pictures during the game so I know where you are. And he sent me pictures, and they were fantastic. So the seats were really, really good,
Oh, that's
apparently.
awesome. Well, strangely enough, speaking of football, I know we were talking about baseball, but the seats that my husband's family bought season tickets to the Panthers when
Oh,
they
my.
started, which was their 25-year anniversary is
Wow.
this year.
Wow.
And when I went to the Panthers game, him and I were dating. Was one of the first games. We were in their seats that they got, their season tickets. And I remember being there, and him and I had been dating for about a year and a half. And I remember thinking, oh, I could get used to just hanging out with this guy. Anyway, when I was sitting in those seats is when I actually realized that if this guy asked me to marry him, I'm going to say yes. So the Panthers are very dear to my heart because of that. And we're going to be going to the game in December. So I'm really, November. So I'm really excited.
You're going to have
about
a great time.
Yeah,
There's
we will.
nothing like looking around and seeing what you can get from marrying a guy that makes you want to marry him.
I
That's for
know.
Sure.
I know. It's
So cool,
anyway.
yeah. And it's really interesting, too, because there's so many stories that came out of the Cubs in 2016. One is there's an old quote, and it was Harry Carey, the Cubs announcer who died some years ago, who was on the air many years before, who said, as sure as God made little green apples, the Cubs are going to win a World Series someday, or the Cubs are going to be in the World Series someday. So the day after the Cubs won, which I think was a Wednesday, the next day, a bunch of fans went out to Harry's grave and brought bags of little green apples,
Aw,
which is really cool.
that is cool.
Also, there's a wonderful promotion that the Cubs did years and years ago. And it was where they would allow fans to buy tiles where they could have like their names put on them, whatever, and it would actually be put on Wrigley Field, on the outside, I think, of Wrigley Field. And there was one family where they bought tiles. I think they put their names on it, and they said, "Still waiting."
Aw.
The day after the World Series, their son, who had been at the game, or maybe not, he was at least a Chicago fan still, his son went out, found their tile, and wrote on it, "Not anymore."
Aw, yay.
So cool.
She's
So-
crying.
Yeah, she's crying. I cry at everything. If you ever hear me stop in the middle of a jam, it'll be because I've gotten really choked up or moved about something, and we're going to be talking about a lot of those things. So, you're going to be hearing a lot of silence on the air, and that's me choking up and trying not to be whatever. So this happened last night when we were talking about my son at Arrowhead. I ended up choking up. We were talking about the movie The Right Stuff, and I got it choking up so much that they had to reach over and give me some napkins so I could wipe my eyes, which is embarrassing. It's
Well,
just,
hey, that's the thing that life's made of, the intimate moments that touch our hearts. And
yeah,
we just want to.
exactly. The things that move you. It used to be, this is fascinating, when I was younger, I would be moved by things, but I would never feel choked up to the point where I was crying about it. And then I got pregnant with my children. And the interesting thing is, since I gave birth, I choke up over everything.
Yeah, once your kids are born, everything
know.
is sentimental.
I think it's kind of interesting because my kids, when they're watching movies and something comes along that they think is moving, they'll turn and look at me.
Yeah.
It's like I'm the entertainment suddenly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an embarrassing
When
thing.
I'm at a sports movie, I always reach over and touch my husband's eyes to see if he's crying. Because, he only cries at sports movies.
Well, some of them. Listen, there's some sports movies it's worth crying over, like the movie Miracle.
Yeah. Oh,
my
yes.
God, one of my favorites.
Great.
Love it.
Okay. Well, we have come to the end of this jam.
And the
so-
end of episode 1. We are finished our first episode of our very first Talk Jam podcast, and we are so excited. We want you to come along and be with us in our next jams. We'll let you know when they are. And we're excited to see you, so come back and see us jam again, okay? Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Talk Jam. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review and tell your friends. Email us your thoughts and show ideas at talkjampodcast@gmail.com. All opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and should not be attributed to anyone else. Till next time, keep on jamming.